Hi girls, welcome to the introductory session on post-colonial writing. Before we start with the play by Wole Soyinka, you should understand a bit more about post-colonial writing in general, and that's the purpose of this introductory lecture. Post-colonial writing is a category devised to replace and expand upon what was once in Britain called Commonwealth literature. As a label, it thus covers a wide range of writings from countries that were once colonies or dependencies of the European powers. There has been much debate about the scope of the term. Should predominantly white ex-colonies like Ireland, Canada, Australia, US should be included or excluded? So that is a frequent debate upon the which all literatures should be included in the post-colonial writing. In practice, anyway, the term is applied most often to the writings from Africa, the Indian subcontinent, the Caribbean, and the other regions whose histories during the 20th century are marked by colonialism, anti-colonial movements, and subsequent transitions to the post-independence society. Critical attention to this large body of the work in academic context is often influenced by a distinct school of post-colonial theory which developed in the 1980s and 90s under the influence of Said's landmark study named Orientalism, which was published in 1978. Post-colonial theory considers vexed cultural political questions of national and ethnic identity, otherness, race, imperialism, and language during and after the colonial periods. It draws upon the other theories like post-structuralism and deconstruction in order to unravel the complex relations between the imperial center and colonial periphery, often in ways that have been criticized for being excessively abstruse. The principal luminaries of post-colonial theory after Said have been Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, Homi K. Bhabha, Hania Lumba, and many other critics that you will be learning later. Post-colonial writing involves a study with the experience of colonialism and its present and past effects, both at the local level of ex-colonial societies and at the level of more general global developments thought to be the after effects of empire. Post-colonialism often involves the discussion of experiences such as slavery, migration, suppression and resistance, difference, race, gender, and place, as well as the responses to the discourses of imperial Europe, such as history, philosophy, anthropology, and linguistics. The term is as much about conditions under imperialism and colonialism proper as about conditions coming after the historical end of colonialism. A growing concern among post-colonial critics has been with racial minorities in the West embracing Native and African Americans in the US, British Asians, African Caribbeans in the UK, and Aborigines in Australia and Canada, among others. Because of these features, postcolonialism allows for a wide range of applications, designating a constant interplay and slippage between the sense of a historical transition, a socio-cultural location, and an epochal configuration. Post-colonial writings also questions the role of Western literary canon and Western history as dominant forms of knowledge making. Western literary canon means all those texts belong to the Greek classical age that we consider as the classics in literature. They will come under the Western literary canon that I just gave you an example. And Western history as dominant forms of knowledge making. It emerged at the same time that many colonies were fighting their way to independence. The terms First World, Second World, Third World, and Fourth World nations are critiqued by post-colonial critics because they reinforce the dominant positions of Western cultures populating First World status. The critique includes the literary canon and histories written from the perspective of the first world cultures. So, for example, a post-colonial critique might question the works included in the canon because the canon does not contain works by authors outside Western culture. So, as we know, this colonies started writing soon after on their way to independence. It really began picking up as a coherent literary movement in the mid 20th century. Many classic post-colonial texts were published between the 1950s and the 1990s. So you know that is the period of decolonization across the world. And while drama and poetry are important in post-colonial literature, it's really the novel that defines the movement. Post-colonial writers emerging from Africa, South Asia, the Caribbean, South America, and other places wrote back to the empire. Seminal post-colonial writers such as Nigerian author Chinua Achebe and Kenyan author Ngugi wa Thiong'o have written a number of stories recounting the suffering of colonized people. For example, in his work Things Fall Apart, which is considered as one of the seminal texts of post-colonial literature, Achebe details the strife and devastation that occurred when British colonists began moving inland from the Nigerian coast. The post-colonial text explicitly or allegorically represent various aspects of colonial oppression that you can find in the texts that are prescribed for you also. It reveals about the problematics of post-colonial identity, including the relationship between personal and cultural identity and such issues as double consciousness and hybridity. The characters, persons or groups are identified as other or stranger. That you can see one example is there in your text also, in Strong Breed also. When you come across that play, you will understand. It reveals about the politics or psychology of anti-colonial resistance. It also discusses about the operations of cultural difference, the ways in which race, religion, gender, class, sexual orientation, cultural beliefs and customs combine to form individual identity. Often these texts respond to or comment upon the characters, themes or assumptions of a canonized work. There are meaningful similarities between the post-colonial writings across the world. When you learn all the poems that are there in your syllabus, you will understand that they are the themes that they are dealt with are more or less the same. Even the geographical locations are absolutely different. Post-colonial writers are really interested in the concepts of nationhood and nationalism. Now you can look into some of the seminal texts that are considered as good texts by the post-colonial theorists. One is The Wretched of the Earth, which was published in 1961 by Frantz Fanon. Then Said's Orientalism, Said's Culture and Imperialism, Camus Braithwaite's The History of the Voice, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak's In Other Worlds Essays in Cultural Politics, Dominic Lacapra's The Bounds of Race, Perspectives on Hegemony and Resistance, Homi K. Bhabha's The Location of Culture. So these are some of the important theoretical texts where you can find the ideologies of post-colonialism. Now we look into the important fiction and non-fiction texts that comes into post-colonial literature. First one being Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, I mentioned earlier. Then comes Wole Soyinka's The Interpreters, Ngugi wa Thiong'o's A River Between. Only I am just mentioning the important texts. Taib Salia's The Season of Migration to the North, Ruth Prawar Jabwala's Heat and Dust, Buchi Emi Cheta's The Joys of Motherhood, Carey Hume's The Born People, Robertson Davis' What's Bred in the Bone, Kazuo Ishiguro's The Remains of the Day, Bharati Mukherjee's Jasmine, Jill Kerr Conway's The Road from Korea, Helena Norberg's Ancient Futures Learning from Ladakh, Michael Ojante's The English Patient, Geeta Mehta's The River Sutra, Arundhati Roy's The God of Small Things, Patrick Chamosio's Texaco. So these are texts from different parts of the world, those were former British colonies or any of the European colonies. All these texts hold the ideology that decolonized people develop a post-colonial identity that is based on cultural interactions between different identities, cultural, national, and ethnic, as well as gender and class based, which are assigned varying degrees of social power by the colonial society. Now, this post-colonial drama is another genre that we will be dealing with in the next lecture. So, we'll look into the post-colonial drama in detail, and then we'll move on to volley sewing as the strong breed. So, wait for the next video, girls. Have a nice day. Thank you.